Soda bread is the quintessential quick bread. It can be everything from savory to eat with stews, or you can make it sweeter and add dried fruits and nuts. If you need a bread to serve at any meal, this is the one to do. In this chapter, I'm going to show you my Irish soda bread. It's inspired by a trip I took to Ireland. Every single household has their own recipe, so this is my Zoe Francois version of Irish soda bread. It's a quick, simple recipe that I can't wait to show you. So let's get started. All I need is a big bowl. And all the ingredients just go into the bowl. I'm not even using a spoon or anything to make it. I'm just gonna use my hands. So I'm using whole wheat flour. You'll see soda bread with all white flour, but I like this version because it's a little bit healthier. It's got that nutty quality from the wheat flour. I'm also adding oat flour. Oat flour adds another level of flavor to it. So a little bit of oat flour for both the taste and the texture of the bread. And then a tiny bit of all-purpose flour to just lighten up the loaf a little bit. So all of my flours go into the mix. I'm adding a bit of sugar just to give it, it's not gonna be a sweet bread, but it gives it this really nice mellow flavor to it. And so a tiny bit of sugar into the mix, then of course soda. Baking soda is what's gonna give us the rise to our bread. So you wanna add your baking soda and then salt to perk up all of the flavors and give it a nice balance of flavor. That's it, my dry ingredients. I'm just using my fingertips like a bit of a whisk. I'm gonna whisk all of that together. Make sure I don't have any lumps of flour or baking soda in there. And just whisk it until they're all combined, just like that. Then you can add dried fruits or nuts or anything else that you want to do. You can make this whatever you want to. I'm just using dried cherries because I love them. And that's it. So I'm just going to whisk these around in my dry ingredients. The last thing is buttermilk. I'm using the buttermilk because it's acidic. It's going to help with the flavor, but also it activates the baking soda, and that's what's going to give it the rise. The baking soda is alkaline. The buttermilk is acid, and the two of them together create the rise in the oven. Okay, so I'm going to start with about a cup of my buttermilk, and I'm going to just drizzle that over the top. You never know exactly how much liquid you're going to need. It depends on the kind of flour that you're using. It depends on the time of year. So I don't want to just dump it all in because I don't necessarily know that I'll use it all. I'm, again, just using my fingers like a claw almost to just work that buttermilk in there. I'm not pressing down. I'm not kneading this. I don't want to overdevelop the gluten. The gluten is the protein in the flour, and it activates when you add a liquid. But I want this to be kind of tender and soft, so I don't want to overdevelop that gluten. So you can see that my soda bread is still very powdery and dry, so I do need to drizzle a little more buttermilk in there. I may end up using it all. I may reserve a tablespoon or so. I just want to use enough until this comes together. So this is just getting your fingers in there. I think there's no better way to get to know a dough than to use your hands. You could totally do this with a spoon, but then you're not going to get to know the feeling of this. It should be wet enough that it all holds together, but you want it dry enough that it's going to hold the shape of a ball. So that looks really good. I'm just going to give it a couple of turns in the bowl, pressing it into a ball. And that's it. And then I have to take the dough that's clung to my fingers off and get that onto the ball as well. You want all of the ingredients in your recipe and not on your hands. Okay, our dough is ready. And now we need to get a vessel to bake it in. You can do this in a cake pan. You can even just form it and bake it on a sheet tray with parchment paper. I like to do it in a cast iron pan with about a tablespoon of soft butter rubbed onto the pan. Because this bread doesn't have any butter in it, but I like the crust of the bread to have that richness. It adds a bit of crustiness to the edge, and I just find it's delicious. So look at that, nice thick coating of the butter, because I want that to infuse into the crust of the dough. And then I'm just gonna place my mixed soda bread right into the pan, like so, and then pat it into a nice neat circle in the pan like so. And then the last finishing touch is just to score the top like this. I'm just gonna do across. It's about a ½ inch deep cut. I score the top so that the bread will open up in a really nice way. If you don't score it, it's just gonna sort of open up in a very rustic fashion, which is totally fine. It's also tradition. And then I'm going to put a pat of butter right there in the cross of the bread. Again, the dough doesn't have any butter in it, but I'm infusing a little bit of butter into the top. So the finishing touch is to put a dusting of sugar. Now, of course, if you're doing a savory version of this, you would leave off the sugar. But because I'm using the dried cherries, I'm just gonna add a tiny little crust of sugar to the top. Not too much, just a little bit, right over the dough and into my butter. That's it. Our oven is set at 425, which is a pretty high heat, but we want a jolt of heat to activate the baking soda to give us a nice rise. We also want to develop a beautiful crust around the edge. And then after 5 minutes, we're going to drop the heat to 375 so the inside can bake properly. So here we go. Right into our oven. 5 minutes, and we're gonna come back and drop the heat. We're not gonna open the door, we're just gonna lower the heat. It's been 30 minutes, so I'm gonna check on my soda bread. It smells ready. Looks ready. It's beautiful. That initial high heat gave it the jolt that it needed, so it rose really beautifully. And look at that. You can see the little bit of butter in there, and it sort of seeps into the soda bread. So we are all set. It's absolutely beautiful. And I just need to wait a little bit to cut into it. It's still piping hot from the oven. So unlike a yeasted bread that you have to wait until it's like room temperature before you cut into it, otherwise it can be gummy. With a quick bread like this, you can still cut it when it's warm. I gotta cut into it, see how it came out. Let's get ourselves a little bread knife. Slice into it. That little bit of butter on the top soaked right into my loaf. Okay, let's see. Look at that. Look at that beautiful caramelized crust. We got a really nice rise from that hot oven. The baking soda did its job, and a little bit of butter on there. A little bit more. Okay, let's test it. The combination of the nuttiness from the whole wheat flour and the oat flour is so dynamite. You can't think of a simpler way to bake bread. It's just so easy. In this chapter, we learned how to make a super simple traditional soda bread. Every household in Ireland has their own version of a soda bread, and you should add it to yours as well. So thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time.